landed on 15, which is poop, seriously. Okay, so our first topic on the big wheel of birth is poop, which is probably kind of fitting because actually when you talk to many couples, this is a question that is really in a lot of people's minds is, what about pooping in labor? So it is one of those things that people talk about a lot. A lot of people have fears around it, which is totally valid. So let's break it down a little bit. First of all, poop in early labor can be a really good sign that labor is on its way. So because the colon and the uterus are both sympathetic organs, they're right next to each other. So when the uterus starts contracting, oftentimes we'll see our colon start contracting and we have some loose stools, we have an increase in poop, maybe diarrhea. It is actually a great thing, and it usually means that labor is on its way. Now, diarrhea in labor itself isn't great. We don't want to dehydrate, but it can be a good sign that labor has started. So that would be poop in early labor or before labor starts. Now, the question that most people have about poop, it's still cracking me up that was our first topic of this wheel, is when you push. It is very common for some poop to come out, and it's actually a good thing again. So the way that the baby's head, actually I have a baby, maybe I'll just pull him out. When the baby's head comes down through the pelvis, right? The head compresses the rectum. So if there is any stool in the rectum, then that is pushed out during pushing. So that can happen. Now, a couple things, especially for partners, to need to know about poop in labor. It's super common. If you notice it while your partner is pushing, please don't say anything. It's really not helpful. It just, go about your business. Often, if you have a nurse or a midwife, OB that's pushing with you, sometimes they will mention, and it's usually in a positive way. So it means that I keep saying pooping instead of pushing. It means that you're pushing really well. So, poop in labor is a great sign. In early labor, in pushing, it's a good sign that you're pushing well, that you're pushing the baby's head down. And that is why the rectum is being compressed and pushing out poop. Other details, if you want to jump into the gory details, there's usually not a large quantity of poop. It's usually a small quantity. And whoever's pushing with you, usually your nurse, will make sure that they clean up and move everything out of the way. If you, as a partner or as the person giving birth, have a sensitivity, a very heightened sense of smell, you might want to be prepared for this during pushing and bring something that smells good, like an essential oil, put it on a little paper towel and have it close by so that you have a nice, pleasant fragrance like your lavender or your peppermint or something like that, something that is pleasing to you, so that you're not distracted by any smells of pushing, let alone poop during pushing. So it is a question that we get all the time as childbirth educators and doulas. Super valid. It's very normal, and yet it's kind of weird, right? It's something they usually do in private. So the good news is that it means that you're pushing the right way. So today was number 9, and let me bring it to the camera and get a little look, is effacement. So effacement has to do with the cervix. So the cervix, when we talk about the cervix, a lot of times you'll hear people talk about dilation of the cervix. So that is the opening. How open is the cervix? And the cervix is the bottom of the uterus. So uterus holds the baby. At the bottom we have the cervix. And thankfully for us, during pregnancy, if everything's going normally, the cervix is nice and closed, and it's also thick. So it's almost like a turtleneck sweater, if you thought of a turtleneck sweater upside down, or a turtleneck shirt with a really tight neck. So it's thick, and imagine that turtleneck closed up. So the other thing about the cervix is it's also pointed backwards, kind of tilted backwards in our body. So when we talk about changes in labor, a lot of times dilation gets all the airtime. We talk about, how many centimeters dilated, but just as important is this word, which is effacement. So effacement is the thinning of the cervix. So as the cervix opens, it also thins out, and it is just as important as dilation. Now, while dilation is measured in centimeters, effacement is measured in percentages. So if your cervix is not effaced at all, it's 0%, 0% effaced, so not effaced at all. And when it's all the way thinned out, it's 100%. So before you start pushing, your cervix should be very thin, 100%, and then also will dilate too. So the good thing to know about effacement is that sometimes you can make change in your effacement while you don't change in your dilation. So it's nice if you're getting a cervical exam to find out what your effacement is. Ask your care provider, what is effacement, if they only tell you dilation. So effacement is an important number to let you know what's going on with your cervix in labor. It goes from 0% to 100% when it's totally thinned out. The other thing to know is that a lot of times a cervix has to efface before it really starts dilating. So sometimes we'll see progress in the effacement before we see progress in dilation. And it's not uncommon for people in the last few weeks or days of pregnancy before labor starts to see some effacement happen in our cervix before labor really gets going. So effacement is the word of the day from the big wheel of birth. Transition. Transition is really cool to talk about because it is an exciting phase of labor. So transition is defined as the period of time when you are in labor. It's when your cervix is in the final stage of opening. So it is when your cervix is in the last 2 centimeters. So the cervix opens 10 centimeters, dilates 10 centimeters, and it's the stage of that 8 to 10 centimeters of opening. So it's the final stage. The thing about transition is that it is usually a couple things that define it. It's usually the shortest stage of labor. It's usually the most intense stage of labor. And it is sometimes defined with a couple of things that you wonder. If you're not always checking your cervix, you might wonder, am I in transition? So a couple things that make transition really real. And that is sometimes we'll see contractions that are within 2 or 3 minutes apart. We might see double peaked contractions, and we might see contractions that are lasting 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes long. So it's really where the uterus is contracting for the longest amount of time and the most frequent to open up the cervix in that last phase of labor. Now, as far as our mood goes, sometimes we'll see, I would say maybe often, especially if you are going unmedicated, don't have an epidural, so you're really feeling all the sensations of labor. Oftentimes we'll see people going through labor where their mood will change in transition and will go to that just really done, over it. I'm done. I don't want to be in labor anymore. I want to be out of here. This is the worst. I can't handle it. I can't do it anymore. So hitting that emotional sign point can be an indication that you are in transition. Other things that might happen is shaking, so kind of trembling, vomiting. It is not uncommon in that stage of labor. So it's really that final intense moment while the cervix makes its last opening. So transition it follows active labor, and what follows transition is urge to push. So it's an exciting phase of labor. It's certainly intense. And if you are in labor and you see all these sign points of transition, it might be a good time to find out what your dilation is. If you are in the middle of trying to decide, make decisions about pain management or changing things up, if you're wondering if you might be in transition, sometimes it's helpful to find out your care provider to tell you what your cervix is doing. Certainly, it is nice to know if you are as close as you are when you're in transition. But it can be a challenge because of those frequent contractions, intense contractions, and sometimes double peaks. So it is something to know about, especially that emotional stage. If you are a support person and you are helping your partner through transition, it is good to know that it's very normal for people in labor to experience that desire to give up, and encouragement, and really being close, providing some really one-on-one support is important at that time. So water breaking. So when you are pregnant, baby lives in a fluid-filled sac, which is the amniotic sac. Actually, let me grab my baby sac. So baby is inside a fluid-filled sac, and just like this one. And when the water breaks, the actually technical term for it is rupturing membranes. So your membranes can rupture at any time. They can, it's not like the movies. The movies always have it wrong, and TV has it wrong, where water breaks at the beginning of labor. Usually you're at the grocery store or something, and there's a huge gush. It really doesn't happen like that. Sometimes it might happen like that. But generally, the majority of people in labor see their water break well into labor, not at the beginning. Though it can break anytime between before labor starts to, on very rare occasions, a baby can be born inside the amniotic sac, which is called being born in caul, E-N-C-A-U-L, in caul. So water breaking, so the baby is inside the uterus, we have a placenta, and inside that is the amniotic sac. When the water breaks, sometimes it can be a gush, a large quantity at once. So then it's very clear that your water breaks if you see a big gush. Though sometimes it can be a trickle. So if you can imagine the amniotic sac kind of like a balloon inside your uterus, if there is a high leak, like maybe up here is where the sac broke, we might see more of a trickle. And if the baby's head is really low in the pelvis, then sometimes the baby's head can kind of cork the fluid, the amniotic fluid, from coming out. And so you might see an on-off kind of trickle. Other things to note about your water breaking is the amniotic sac is a protective component, keeping the baby protected from bacteria. And so when your water breaks, it's really important to contact your healthcare provider and let them know. And they're going to ask for a few things. And you can remember them if you remember the word coat. So C is for color. What is the color of the amniotic fluid that came out? And if it should be a clear color, it might be kind of mucousy. what can be concerning and definitely notable to let your care provider know is if you see any kind of brownish or greenish color to the amniotic fluid. It might mean that your baby has had their first bowel movement inside the womb, and that is in the amniotic fluid. And sometimes that can mean that the baby has been stressed or is stressed, and so it's definitely important to tell your care provider. So you want to note the color. You want to note if there's any kind of odor, so that's the O of coat. So is there a smell? It really shouldn't smell like anything. So, and concerning would be a strong bad smell. And then now if, it broke while you're sitting on the toilet, you might not notice the smell, which is okay. We understand. The A of coat is the amount. So, was it, maybe just a few drops or like a tablespoon? Is it a cup? How much came out? And then the time. So when did that happen? So try to make a note if you got up in the middle of the night, your water broke, look at the time, see what it is, and contact your care provider and let them know. So because the amniotic sac is a protection around the baby, the water breaking definitely means that labor is going to happen. And it depends on your care provider of how long they really feel comfortable letting that go before any kind of contractions are maintained and established, if your water breaks before labor starts or during labor as well. So generally you are, monitored, and care providers might require that you come in to your birthing location, to your hospital, to your birth center to get checked, to be admitted. It really depends on the care provider and their comfort and how they practice as far as what to do when the water breaks. But a couple other things that come to mind, questions that people have with water breaking, if whether or not it's okay to get in a tub. And it is okay to get in a tub even after your water breaks. But what you don't want to do is to put anything inside your vagina once your water breaks. So you're not going to want to put a tampon, you don't need to have sex, nothing inside. Because what happens is, that protective layer is gone for the baby. And so there's more risk of infection. So we want to reduce risk of infection, and one way to reduce risk, a really big way, is not to put anything inside. So generally, providers usually try to limit vaginal exams after water has broken, after, again, that technical term is rupture of membranes, after that has happened. So limiting vaginal exams, not putting anything inside your vagina, and making note of whether your water broke or not. And then the other thing just to remember is that, or to know about water breaking, that I think sometimes surprises people, is that it's continuous. Like the fluid flow keeps going. So it's not like, even if you have a big gush at first, your body will still be generating fluid. And so you will be leaking really throughout labor. So it's not uncommon to even see little gushes when we have a contraction. If you can imagine that water balloon inside your uterus and it's squeezed, well, makes sense during a contraction that you see a gush. So once you have confirmed that your water has broken, you might want to wear a pad and just be ready to catch the fluid, or have some towels handy so that you know that everything is caught. And I always tell, as a doula, I tell my clients that if you are, getting in the car to head to the hospital, you might want to throw a towel in there as well into the car, just in case your water breaks while you are in the car, especially if you have a long car ride. It can't hurt. So water breaking is not like the movies. It's usually well into labor. And it is definitely not it usually does not surprise you while you were at the grocery store, which is, that classic idea that I think all of us get in our heads from the movies. So we have got early labor. Okay, so early labor is the beginning phase of labor. It is the one that seems, it can be such a range. It can be short for some people. It can be very long for other people. And it is the time of labor when labor just gets started. It might even be a time where your body is in early labor, but you don't know that you're in early labor. So you might be having some contractions. Your uterus might be contracting, but likely in early labor, not likely, but often in early labor, the uterus doesn't have a pattern of contractions yet. So contractions might be sporadic where they're happening. You'll get one 5 minutes apart, one 10 minutes apart, one 7, then a big stretch goes. So that's not uncommon to see in early labor. The technical definition of early labor is when your cervix is between 0 centimeters dilated and 6 centimeters dilated. So the cervix dilates 10 centimeters, and our technical term is really 0 to 6 centimeters dilated. So, and that has changed over the years. It used to be 0 to 4 was early labor, and the American College of OBGYNs has updated that to 0 to 6. So it's that early phase of labor where your cervix is dilating 0 to 6. Now, that doesn't mean, early labor doesn't mean that contractions aren't in a pattern, but usually at the very beginning of early labor, we see contractions developing into a pattern. It's also the time of labor where contractions are usually shorter from start to finish. So we might see contractions 30 seconds long, and then they get more of a 45, more of a 1 minute long from start to finish. So we're also seeing contractions going from a shorter time period to a longer time period length during early labor. Early labor is also a time where you might experience some other signs of labor, like you might experience diarrhea. That can be an early labor sign. Sometimes people are a little nauseous. Your water might break in early labor, but it might not. It's not a definite sign of early labor. Sometimes people lose their mucus plug or have some bloody show, both of which are on the wheel, which we will cover at another day. But it's a good time to try to, until active labor, as much as you can, good coping mechanisms during that time is try to go about your day and your life as much as normal as possible and be on the restful side. So if it is a time of day that you are in early labor and you should be sleeping, so if it's overnight, sleep should be your top priority. Rest should be your top priority. And then whenever you have to get up, whenever you have to move around and really deal with labor, then deal with it. But until then, because early labor can be so long, it's really encouraged to try to go about your normal day activities. Now, second time, third time, if you had a baby before, your early labor might look a little bit different. It might be a little bit shorter. It might not look like your first time or your other times giving birth, but it's certainly the time where your body is dilating from 0 to 6 centimeters. Good partner support during early labor is encouraging those normal activities that rest when rest should happen. Definitely bringing water, having that water bottle ready to go, having snacks ready to go, encouraging to move around once labor kind of picks up, encouraging movement and being present is a great way to be a supportive partner in early labor. And again, just being keeping as normal of an activity in a restful fashion as you can. So I don't mean like go to work or go to Target or something like that in early labor, though some people do. But just trying to keep a little bit of normalcy. It's also good in early labor just to check in with your contractions. I wouldn't recommend timing every single contraction, because that can make living life normally not work. Really keeps you focused on time. Sometimes can feel really long if you're timing every contraction, but checking in with your labor as they feel like they've changed. So early labor is also, the other thing to note is it's usually when people are excited about labor, because you've waited a long time and it's an exciting phase. So usually we're more excited and energetic in early labor than maybe an active or transition phase. Today we got number 16, which is bathroom. Bathroom. The bathroom can be an amazing place during labor. So let's talk about it a little bit. First of all, the bathroom is necessary. When you are in labor, it is important to keep your bladder emptied. So if you are still mobile, if you don't have an epidural, then it's a good practice from early labor all the way until you have the baby to try and empty your bladder. Try to go to the bathroom every hour or so. So the bathroom is a place that you should visit on a regular basis. It might take some time to go to the bathroom. So when you're in labor, there's a lot of sensations, your uterus contracting, and some people find it hard to actually let go and relax and go urinate to pee. So sometimes you might have to sit there for a little while. And because of this, I really recommend making your bathroom almost like a mini sanctuary in labor. I also call it a magical laboring cave. So if you want to know more about the magical laboring cave, there is a YouTube video about it. So you can create it like a sanctuary for yourself so that when you go in there, it feels very peaceful, it feels very calm, it feels like a place that you want to labor. This especially is true when you get to the hospital and have a hospital bathroom. So your normal bathroom at home, when you're laboring at home, obviously you know how to make that feel comfortable. You could light some candles, have some low lighting, make sure you bring your music in there. And I'm saying this because when you're in the bathroom, going to the bathroom, it's a great time to kind of hang out a little bit, because laboring on the toilet can be really effective. And sometimes you bring on some really nice strong contractions, and it's also can be a really private location if you go in there alone. And privacy in labor can also strengthen contractions, and it's almost like that animal going into a cave to give birth. So when you're at the hospital, make sure, this is a great tip for partners. When you get to your birthing location, so hospital birth center, if you're not birthing at home, you can make that hospital bathroom, that birth center bathroom, as comfy as possible. So while you're checking in, your partner can do the work of kind of transforming the bathroom. So a couple easy ways to do this. First of all is lighting. Lighting is everything, especially if you're at a hospital. For some reason, those lights at the hospital are just like so strong. They're those fluorescent lights. They're obnoxious. So you can bring a little string of like the fairy lights or the holiday lights and hang them up in the bathroom and turn them on, so that you don't even have to turn on that big light unless there's a real need. And I'm not kidding, this makes things so much better. It is very harsh if you are birthing in a nice low lit room, and then you have to go to the bathroom and you walk in and flip on those giant lights. That's a no-no. So put the lights on. Anytime you're in there, like I said, bring your music in there. If you have a diffuser, if you have any essential oils, If you have anything that smells good, you can, if you have an essential oil, you can drip it on a couple of pieces of paper towel or toilet paper and just leave it in the bathroom, so it kind of creates a nice smell. And then if you are tired of that smell in labor, you can just take that little piece of paper, toilet paper, and just flush it down the toilet so it's gone. So a nice smell, bring your music in, have great lighting, and those are some keys to really transforming the bathroom into an awesome place for labor. Now, as a doula working with clients, I've often seen when my clients are sitting on the toilet that they might experience more intense contractions, and sometimes they will avoid going pee because they don't want the intense contractions, and sometimes you might have to kind of squat over the toilet to make it work if it's feeling too intense. But the other thing is, if you're looking to strengthen your contractions, give the bathroom a try. That really might be a good trick. I think that everyone should spend some time laboring in the bathroom, but only if you create it into that sanctuary, into that great, really comfortable environment. And it can be easily done with just a couple of things. The fairy lights or the holiday lights or battery operated candles are really nice for bathrooms as well. So don't forget to visit the bathroom often, at least once an hour in labor. And partners, your partner can help you do this by saying, after that next contraction, let's go to the bathroom. So it's an easier way to convince someone to go to the bathroom than saying, hey, do you need to go to the bathroom? Just say, why don't we go to the bathroom after the next contraction? So visit the bathroom often and set it up like a sanctuary so that it's super comfortable and it's a great alternative to laboring in your hospital or your birth center room. So hydration. Okay, hydration. Keeping yourself hydrated is super important. Now, it's not just for labor and birth. It's actually during pregnancy, labor, birth, and postpartum. And it is so important. It is actually something that we've seen sometimes women can start getting contractions, early contractions, or go into labor early if they aren't properly hydrated. So when you're pregnant and you feel like you're drinking a lot, keep it up during labor and birth because it is so key. And sometimes we'll even see contractions in labor start acting weird, being in a weird pattern, slowing down, and hydration might be the key. So a couple ways you can hydrate. Obviously, you can drink water. You can eat foods that are very hydrating, fruits, and in addition to your fluids. A good thing in labor is often to switch up a water with maybe an electrolyte drink. You might want to add something like coconut water or a Gatorade, a Powerade, a Recharge to your water or as an addition to water. And then sometimes in labor, if your body is just not hydrating well or you are vomiting a lot, you might need to get IV fluid hydration through IV fluids. And so that would just be a bag of IV fluids that is given and controlled by your care provider. And the other thing to note is if you are being given IV fluids in labor, it's still good to keep that water nearby and have sips of water, unless you have an epidural, and then you will change from water to ice chips. So after an epidural, you're hydrated through your IV bag and your epidural, and they don't want you to have a lot of extra fluid coming in. So hydration is really important in labor. Partner tip, instead of asking your partner in labor if they want water or if they're thirsty or if they need a drink, just have a bottle or a cup with a straw. A straw is key because, as we know, drinking from a straw is so much easier. So instead of saying, hey, are you thirsty? Just take the bottle and put it right up, the straw right up to her lips after a contraction. Contraction ends, couple seconds, put the straw up, and just offer a drink that way. And the great thing about that is that she doesn't have to think about it. She just can sip it and be done. And little sips after every other contraction, every third contraction is really important. And it goes nicely with what we talked about yesterday, which is the bathroom. So visiting the bathroom often is great, and you will need to if you are keeping properly hydrated. So pregnancy, hydration, obviously really important. Labor and birth, partners, that's a tip for you. And then the last thing, but not the least, is postpartum. So if you are nursing a baby, if you're feeding a baby, you have to stay hydrated. And it is so important before you sit down to have that feeding to make sure that you have a cup of water next to you. With the straw is easier too, because if you're worrying about a latch, you can just reach up, drink with the straw, and put it back down. Partners, it's a great thing if you look over and she's nursing and doesn't have any water next to her. Go grab some with the straw and put it on a table next to, or offer it if there's not a table nearby, because for proper milk supply, you really need to stay hydrated as well. And it can feel kind of like a chore. I've heard people who don't like drinking water complain or mention that it's really a bummer and a chore to always have to be drinking water and then always have to be going to the bathroom. True story. But it's super important for these phases of labor, birth, and postpartum. Thanks for joining. Bye, guys.